School Transportation Nation, Tony Corpin here, coming off a great Memorial Day weekend. Hope everyone had a nice time. Ryan, Taylor are with us. You guys recovering? Got a sunburn from the beach?
Sunburn from Las Vegas, maybe when we were at ACT Expo last week, but I know we had Memorial weekend as well, so did get a little bit of beach time in, a little rest and relaxation as we're getting ready to head to Indianapolis for STN Expo.
Excellent. Taylor, you had a nice time in Las Vegas as well?
Yeah, it's one thing to the next. So, wrap up ACT Expo and now we look toward Indy, but I'm excited. I'm excited for it.
Wonderful. Well, I'm also excited for our sponsors this week. TransFinder, the leader in school bus routing, and IC Bus, the next generation can change everything. So we appreciate them for being our episode sponsors. And lots to come off with ACT Expo. That's Advanced Clean Transportation, guys. Definitely a lot to take in. The trade show, right? I don't know how many vendors there were, 400, maybe more. It looked like a city of which 2/3 was EV charging companies, which, we debated, are we going to see those same companies or is there going to be consolidation? A lot of startups, a lot of people chasing the money. The trucking industry is there in a big way. A lot of the trucking executives are there, but as we know, there is convergence between trucking and school bus built on a very similar platform with the IC Bus and Thomas Built buses specifically. And both Matthias Karlbaum, CEO, president of Navistar, he was there talking on one of the keynote panels. All the industry leading trucking folks, as well as John O'Leary, who's the CEO of Daimler Trucks North America. Formerly, he was president at Thomas Built Buses, which I know we interviewed him last year talking about trends in electric school bus and where we thought it was heading. And, full year passes by, Ryan. And did we have new information or, it's more of the same? I think they dropped a press release that they're re-engaging Proterra as their battery partner. Obviously, they came out of bankruptcy and got broken apart, part to go to Volvo and the other part to Phoenix Motor Cars. And I guess the battery portion went to Volvo. So that is where the partnership lies now.
Yeah, and I was talking with someone at ACT Expo and learned that Proterra really is business as usual. Volvo, as you said, acquired the battery business of Proterra's when it went bankrupt last year, and really has not touched it. Really wants it, bought it for a reason, and it's really riding that horse. So I know that from a customer standpoint, don't expect any changes really from at least in the near term right now, as I'm seeing it and hearing it. Proterra just moving right along, and then that was before we got the word from Daimler that Thomas Built Buses, as you mentioned, was continuing that relationship, which goes back to 2018 when the Julie came out, and that was the battery of choice. Now, I know that the drivetrain, Proterra had that as well. Thomas is moving and Daimler is moving more to the Meritor Blue Horizon. No news on that at this show, but they did make the headlines that the Proterra battery will continue to power the Thomas Built buses Julie.
Yeah, there's a lot of press conferences around the trade show and a lot of chatter. And I know a lot of OEMs that are on the school bus side are there, right? We saw Bluebird there. We had Green Power there. You have BYD Ride, which they've rebranded to Ride now. They're there. Lion Electric was there. So we were making our rounds to visit everybody. And I know Lion Electric launched a new tractor, which would be the equivalent of like a tractor trailer truck for you guys. Don't think like a tractor, like a agricultural tractor. No, but it's a semi. And in talking with one of their team members, they had basically said that some of the technology that they was found in this tractor, which they called the Lion 8, is going to matriculate through the Lion school bus portfolio, so a different dash. And to your point about the Blue Horizon drivetrain axle, they had indicated that there is testing going on that product might find its way into Lion vehicles in the future. So I would feel like that is still out a little ways, but the individual I was talking to basically indicated that the weight reduction is immensely valuable in terms of what it does, the efficiency of a drivetrain axle. So it sounds like numerous OEMs are considering the technology. And I dropped by the Cummins booth and talked to our friend there a little more about what's happening with Cummins. We're obviously going to see them real soon at STN Expo Indianapolis, days away. And they got an engine tour plant. And last year during the tour, they talked about the electric product as well as the Blue Horizon product. So I'd be curious to get a deeper dive on how they see it, but they definitely indicated to me as well that OEMs were testing the product broadly. So I feel like that's some new technology, Ryan, that might be on the horizon, no pun intended.
Absolutely. Yeah. And speaking of new technology or new vehicles, IC Bus, Navistar, they were there as well. They had their next generation C Series electric, which is also going to, you're going to see that in the June issue. So not to give that away too much, but in the next week or so, look for the June issue of School Transportation News. And I think you're going to see IC Bus pretty prominently with that issue. But as you mentioned, Bluebird, actually next week they have, or a couple weeks, they have an event coming up back out in Indianapolis. So right after we're there, Tony, with STN Expo, they're going to be there partnering with IMI, so the parent company for Safeguard. So there's going to be an announcement thinking a new vehicle or along those lines. That's coming. Always great to see the suppliers, of course, talking with the different OEMs. You mentioned Green Power. We sat down and talked with them at great length and really got a good education on battery technology and where that's going and why you see what you see right now, especially with LFP. But we also get to talk with a lot of other vendors and suppliers. We talked with the folks at Ford Pro Charging. Learning a little bit more about what they're doing. I mean, one of the things you mentioned, Tony, at the forefront of this conversation is something that we've been discussing for a while. So many new players in the EV market, not simply school bus, but when you're looking at the $5 billion clean school bus program, that attracted a lot of attention. And we saw a lot of new faces come to the forefront and chasing that money. And we've seen that retract a little bit. We've seen some folks who were sniffing around and some very established companies, and they've exited and they've seen that, hey, school bus is not as easy as they thought it would be to crack that nut. And then there's the other startups, like you mentioned, Tony. We've seen some startups come and go already. In fact, talking about the trade show, I know I spoke with a couple people, and there were some companies that were going to exhibit that just didn't show up. And I believe one of them went out of business. And so the vendor that they were right next to, they saw their booth space increase a little bit. They had a little bit of a waiting room to talk to some of their executives. So definitely a lot continuing to happen with EV. And let's not forget about the low carbon side. There was conversation about renewables, renewable diesel, renewable propane, CNG. Now CNG really is not much of a player at all anymore in the school bus market. But in terms of propane, we know that there are a lot of existing propane powered school buses out there. We've seen that shrink over the last couple of years. The TRC companies, which is formerly known as Gladstein, Neandros and Associates, that put on ACT Expo, they put out their State of Sustainability report every year to launch their ACT Expo. And they note what we've noted, that propane did shrink overall. Now, this survey they do is looking at 200 commercial fleets, so school bus fleets, as well as and mostly the trucking fleets and delivery and whatnot. But certainly following that line that we've seen of more interest going into EV, and of course with propane, the school bus industry at least doesn't have the options anymore. So one of the other pieces of news that came out just before ACT Expo, going back to Bluebird, was they re-upped their exclusive partnership with Roush Cleantech on that propane system, that auto gas system for the Vision propane. And that's, again, we've talked about it, Tony, that's the only propane game in town. So we had a lot of conversations, at least I did, with some folks about what's that looking like and why is that? And I know, we've talked about Cummins. They had planned to come out with a propane version of their agnostic engine, the B series. That kind of seems indefinitely on hold, at least right now. I know they've pushed back their octane, which is their gasoline. That's going to come out first. Here, being told now that that's going to be around 2026. In fact, we've talked about that, so that was confirmed at the show. So, certainly as we move forward and amid all these mandates, New York, California, the states that follow the California Air Resources Board regulations, and some others, certainly, a lot of if you're not a Bluebird customer or willing to move over to become a Bluebird customer for propane, really right now it's diesel or electric school buses.
Yeah, Ryan, appreciate that. We're going to talk a little more about ACT Expo, but we have a quick green tip to bring you. Today's EV funding tip is brought to you by IC Bus. Are you ready to take advantage of another round of EPA grant funding to support your school district's sustainability goals? As your trusted advisor, IC Bus and their dealer network are ready to answer questions on all available funding sources, grants, and tax incentives, including the new $400 million Clean Heavy-Duty Vehicle Grant Program. Time is of the essence to get your application submitted by July 25th. For application assistance, visit icbus.com/clean school bus. That's icbus.com/clean school bus and start your journey for electric today. All right, we're back. Taylor, talk to me about your experience at ACT Expo. I know you were walking the trade show floor. I mean, we all split up, right? And so it was like we would reemerge in the media room and kind of debrief each other on what was happening. What were your big takeaways? What were you seeing and hearing on the floor?
Yeah, and I want to go back to that panel that you mentioned with the CEOs. And, obviously ACT Expo is definitely geared toward the trucking industry with a little flavor of school busing in there. And the panel was actually really interesting because John O'Leary, as you mentioned, of Daimler, actually gave kudos to electric school buses. And so when you're talking about, infrastructure, the trucking industry has flatlined right now because of these infrastructure challenges, these infrastructure barriers, which makes sense, right? We don't see public chargers on the roads really for electric vehicles. We're just not seeing that, which is a barrier for the trucking industry. Whereas with school busing, it's a hub. So you know how many miles you get on your school bus. You know what route you're putting the school bus on. It goes out, it comes back, you charge it up. And so he was talking about how the electric school bus industry has actually gone upward, whereas trucking has flatlined because of those infrastructure challenges. So I thought that was really interesting to kind of call out the school bus industry like that and really praise it in a way to be like, hey, this is an example of where battery electric vehicles can go.
Yeah, that's interesting. I know in hearing some of the truck OEMs, they were very exuberant, very excited about the future of electric trucks. But definitely it did not grow at the pace that they had anticipated. And there's definitely pushback. I mean, the CEO or president of JB Hunt which is one of the largest trucking and shipping companies out there, she talked a lot about trying to convert JB Hunt's fleet to electric and or work with their clients, as they positioned it, that may want to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 50%. And she modeled out kind of how to achieve that: multimodalities, maybe buying credits, moving the fleet to EV. And it was a challenge. There were a lot of elements in there to gain efficiencies, to be greener. But she also talked about the need of electrical power within the country. And, to electrify all the cars on the road, she said we need 40% more grid capacity. 40% more. And she's not even talking about commercial vehicles, I think, at that point. She was just talking about registered cars on the road. So it's an interesting dilemma that we're in. Now, she seemed to think on the short term, it just didn't make financial sense. I think maybe for JB Hunt, they may be testing it. I think that's really what I walked away from that really big OEM panel, was they really hit on try one, try two, at least get your feet wet. Don't look at the cost modeling right now. You just don't want to be behind the curve when it comes to adopting these new technologies, because you might get passed by real quickly. So I think the same goes for school bus. Now we're being propped up by federal funding, state funding. Last week I was on a webinar with AZ Bus Sales talking about a lot of funding within California, a lot of programs that they have, hundreds of millions of dollars, things that can be stacked together with the EPA Clean School Bus funding, things that can't. Now, California is a bit of an anomaly to some degree because of the amount of funding available. But we saw questions on the webinar where somebody said, hey, I have a CNG bus or a few CNG buses. And in the past, CNG really wasn't eligible to scrap, but they've changed it or they've adapted. And now CNG buses can be sunsetted as part of that scrappage program. So that was really interesting to me to see gas or CNG to be involved in that. So kind of full circle back to ACT Expo, it's how do we evolve as an industry? How do we see the need of the customer? How do we advance the market with conversation? So that's why we as STN, Ryan Taylor and I, love going to these conferences, because no, they are not really a ton about school buses. They're really about the bigger trends that we're seeing developing in the market. How can we be on the forefront of those trends and look at some of these market makers where you've got basically the 5 largest truck OEMs in North America, probably the world, on this stage. And they're really giving their feedback on where the market is going. So it's very interesting.
I think another part of the conversation that can't be overlooked is also policymaking. That was something that really came out in a electrification executive roundtable that I saw last Wednesday. And one of the heads of Chevron, Andy Walls, was talking about we're in an election year. And we don't know what the presidential election is going to look like. And we see a lot of politics and policy making at play in states like California and New York. And that's driving a lot of this. And he actually made a comment that California right now for Chevron is uninvestable, quote unquote, because of the policies, really where they're driving out fossil fuels. And granted, Chevron and like Shell, which was also on this panel, and the others, they're getting into electric, right, and hydrogen, full tilt. They see the writing on the wall. But I think that everybody agrees that it's going to take a little bit of everything, and we're not there yet with EV. Certainly, we heard what we've been, talking about for a while, that school bus really is the best, or one of the best use cases right now for electric, and we have that clean school bus money, but there are a lot of unknowns, and I feel like a broken record, and I've been saying that for years now through COVID and with all this electric transition talk, but we still are in a lot of unknowns about what's next. And one of those things that they touched on was the politics at play. And Chevron mentioned, Andy Walls mentioned, hey, they've worked with both administrations. They worked with the Biden administration. They worked with Trump administration before that. we'll see if one of those administrations is in control going forward, or at least, I should say in the White House going forward, starting next year. But they're prepared, and a lot of others are prepared to do what they need to do to try to get ahead of this thing. But certainly policy does play a big role. And I talked with several people that said, a lot of times, as we know, these politicians, they're not fleet operators. They don't know what it takes to run a fleet operation or a business, and they're kind of following the headlines, and they're following the PR to try to push this green initiative when it's pushing it extremely fast. And like you said, Tony, the grid does need upgrades. I talked with folks that say it is possible, and we're working in that direction. We can do it. But over and over again, folks said it takes a village. We've talked about it takes a village of fuels and options to actually power these vehicles. It also takes a village of stakeholders. Everyone's got to come to the table. From the utilities all the way down to the operators, the vendors, the OEMs, the charging infrastructure folks. Everybody's got to work together. And right now, unfortunately, I think that there's still a little bit of folks going out on their own and in making their own interpretations that best suit their needs. And this is a capitalistic society, but a lot of folks over and over again, I heard them say, we need to come together. We need to figure this out, because if we don't get on the same page, this thing could go south really fast, and no one wants to see that.
Yeah, and we saw that in the panel too, just about the OEMs coming together, all those partnerships, talking about ways that they can help each other, because 5-10 years ago, right, they're all competitors, and now you have some of the top trucking OEM experts on this stage talking about how the only way to face these hurdles of electrification is to come together, to partner, to share ideas, and really operate as one. And, that's what we're seeing with Craig Beaver in Beaverton, Oregon. He's running electric school buses, and he's publishing his data on his school website. So he wants people to go out there, read, see the data that he's getting, because it's not just one person doing this, right? It's a whole community, it's a whole team. And if one person's data can help someone else, I think that's kind of the goal of the whole thing.
Yeah. And congratulations to Craig Beaver and Beaverton School District there for winning the Fleet Award there at ACT Expo for the public school category. And then we also had a winner for student. So they made some big headlines with their Fleet Award. I believe it was the first time a school bus fleet had won that private fleet award. So congratulations to both of them.
Yeah, I believe Kevin Matthews was accepted that award on their behalf, and I caught up with Kevin while I was there as well. And he's off on a few panels. I know all of us were sitting in the school bus electrification panel there on the last day before we were headed out, and we saw a few familiar faces. Saw Corey Muirhead from Logan Bus Company out in New York, which is pretty much the largest regional school bus contractor in New York City and Long Island. They're very large, and talking about their pathway to going electric, right? And First Student, obviously, as well, being the largest out there in terms of deployments, talks about Quebec and kind of their deployment, which is the largest. There's 300 plus vehicles in Quebec. So they've learned a lot from what you need to do and in the environments and things like that. Corey Muirhead at Logan Bus Company touched a little bit on repowers, right? So in previous years at ACT Expo, I'd seen a lot of company with repower, which they call like a skateboard, right? You have kind of a chassis and they build on top of it, or I didn't really see as much of that this year. Ryan, did you see much of the way of repowers? No, right?
No, I was talking with someone who formerly was at one of those companies, and he was having a meeting with somebody along those lines. But I didn't see anybody showing repowers. Now, there were a lot of folks walking the floor, but certainly, we've written about what Logan Bus has done, and he brought up some really good points. And under the Inflation Reduction Act, those tax incentives, he pointed out that repowers apply for that. So they don't apply for the Clean School Bus Program. EPA wants brand new OEM built electric school buses, but you can get repowers through that IRA incentive. And he was pointing out that, they're even looking at buying brand new diesel buses and then converting them. So like to your point, Tony, they're ripping out the traditional transmission, the motor, the traditional, ICE vehicle drivetrain, and then they're replacing it with batteries and the electric drivetrain. And, they're buying a bus for a diesel bus for 120, 125 grand. And it's costing them anywhere between 50 and 60 grand to then not retrofit, but reprogram it or make it electric. And so it's about 180 grand. And you compare that to 375, 400 around those ballparks. I mean, we're seeing different numbers from different OEMs, but some considerable savings. And something that was interesting from the first student standpoint, where you were talking about what Kevin Matthews was discussing with Quebec. We're talking about these mandates, and New York is the big one that everyone here in the States is looking at, 2027, to start buying. They can only buy electric school buses, and they have to have their fleets completely 100% by around 2035. There's some wiggle room there for some districts. But Quebec today, they have to be zero electric. So we can learn some lessons from what's going on there in Quebec.
Yeah, I think overall that was a good panel discussion. Lots of leaders on that panel, definitely talking about the unprecedented funding for electric school buses. So if it's something that you're thinking about, this is really the time to try it. There's money out there, and the panelists were kind of saying, hey, we don't know when this type of money is going to be available specifically for school buses again.
If ever, yeah.
So definitely the time is now to approach electrification.
And something else that was interesting, we talk about timing, Tony, with our June issue. We have a big article coming out on microgrids. A lot of discussion about microgrids. I was in probably 3 or 4 sessions and then having, separate side conversations with folks where microgrids came up. So that is certainly an emerging technology or suite there, site location. Where folks are looking at microgrids over and over again. I'm in our article, and then I'm hearing folks talk about not needing to rip up their existing parking lots or their facilities and go above ground. First Student has that solution, which actually their chief engineer Alex Cook won our inaugural STN Innovator of the Year award for contractors back in 2022. But we're hearing that from a lot of folks. Boston Public Schools, is doing that. We have, of course, some folks that are in that article that's coming out in about a week's time. So a lot of emerging things to be looking at, and really, microgrids to me is sounding much more viable than V2G. V2G still, a lot of folks are saying, it's not ready yet, and there was a lot of talk about that and promise, and that's going to be an aspect of it going forward. But it really seems from an operational standpoint where we're going to really see a needle being moved in terms of infrastructure could be microgrids.
Yeah, I think also when you think of microgrids, Ryan, and I know Taylor reported on this last year at ACT Expo, where the propane industry, PERC, Propane Education Research Council, is displaying what that looks like, right? So you've got a propane tank attached to this microgrid, which powers the chargers, right? It's a little weird when you've got a diesel generator powering a electric charger. That feels like, no, that's wrong, right? Like that defeats the purpose. Where propane, they're saying, well, we're clean energy, we're domestic energy.
Well, renewable propane.
Yeah, renewable propane too, right? So the carbon index or intensity of this is much better. So you've got these kind of standalones. And one of the vendors I spoke to on the trade show floor said LA Unified purchased 18 of these things, and they're going to deploy them in the field. Now, what's so interesting about this is, to my knowledge, microgrids are not eligible yet for funding through Clean School Bus. But on the AZ Bus Sales webinar that I was on, they indicated that maybe for California and some of these state funds that they might be. So We'll be very curious to see how infrastructure evolves in terms of the eligibility list of products. I know we talked about repowers. Were they going to be eligible? And they've not been eligible, right? Now, maybe like you said, tax incentives or some of these other things, maybe there's an advantage there. But with the microgrids, since there's so much energy around this, it might really be interesting to see the programs evolve to make this an eligible funding mechanism to acquire those. And then you may really see a big jump up in this type of technology in the offerings. So I only know a couple of companies that are offering the propane-based solution, but I assume there's more opportunity out there, and there's power generation and microgrid technologies that are looking at different channels using solar. I know, Ryan, we've talked about that some of these other renewable energy sources are being dropped in. And so, yeah, it was interesting to me to hear some of that and think, wow, okay, a big school district like LAU is jumping in on this. And that's how they've figured out how they're going to dive into this. Because, if they can't get the utility to pull the power there fast enough, what's the next best thing?
It'd be interesting to see, since we have LA Unified in Reno, Greenville Summit on July 14th. I think, Tony, you can dig into that a little bit more. We can get some details. So certainly more reason, folks, to head over to stnexpo.com /West for our Reno show. Register today. A lot of great conversations out there. And overall, though, something that really stood out to me was, that traditional CapEx versus OpEx conversation, Tony. And up till now, folks that are, when they're buying electric buses, they see that CapEx, those numbers, those upfront numbers. And if they can't get it offset by grants, they're just, even if they can, they're worried about, what happens if those funds, are not available tomorrow. But really a big shift in the conversation to looking at that OpEx. And we've been discussing it in the articles where districts are seeing some pretty significant savings. We've heard from the get-go, hey, anywhere between 60 to 80% you can recoup when you factor in the fuel savings and the maintenance savings. We're actually seeing those numbers come to fruition. I saw, I believe it was, Craig Beaver back to Beaverton School District, $130,000 to $135,000 being saved in fuel over the lifetime of the bus. And that's looking at like 10, 12 years. And right there, that's some huge savings. Just take that off the top right there of a $350,000 electric school bus, and you're looking at, now we are actually price parity with a brand new diesel. And we know diesels are getting more expensive. TRC companies, GNA, with their State of Sustainable Fleet survey, found that diesel across the board is increasing 12%, predicted to increase 12% based upon EPA GHG phase 3. Actually, some people thought it might be more than that. It still could be, but certainly diesel is getting more expensive. And, I think that's where we're going to start seeing the price parity just in a different way than I think everyone anticipated.
Yeah. And speaking with Cummins too, Ryan, when I was speaking with them about that octane engine release, they had indicated that it did not make sense for them to release the engine based on current regulatory guidelines and to wait because they don't want to engineer the engine twice. So they're going to engineer it to the farthest guideline, which I believe would be
2027.
2027 guideline.
That's when it phases in and goes through 2032. So that makes a lot of sense. These Cummins and these companies are spending millions and billions of dollars on R&D, and you'd hate to throw the baby out with the bathwater and start over again, because ultimately who's going to suffer? The customer. That's going to be passed along, and we're going to see school bus prices just increase even more steadily. And we've seen some pretty big hikes over the last several years. So that completely makes sense. But we know that, with propane specifically, it's yes, the school buses have a great use case for that. And we don't see the market as big in other places for propane. But I was talking with someone who pointed out, hey, there are some really big fleets out there, more box fleet delivery, that really rely on propane and have done a great job, and propane has done a great job for them.
Yeah, Ryan, I'm really looking forward to SCN Expo and Green Bus Summit. I know Indianapolis is around the corner. So, guys, looking forward to seeing you there if you're coming out to be a part of all the good stuff we have planned. But also, SCN Expo in Reno. Ryan brought it up a few times, and it's going to be July 12th through the 17th. We still have our early bird save $100 off your registration. Ends June 7th. That is not far away. So be sure and lock in those savings. scnexpo.com/west. We got a full agenda up, speakers, networking events, Green Bus Summit, maybe a few seats left in our Transportation Director Summit. So that's filling up fast. So don't wait. I know our hotel room block is filling up. So it's going to be another big show. We're really excited for it, the whole team, but we got a lot to go. And before we go, we got a great message from our sponsor, TransFinder. Do you remember a time when you could just cherry pick the best solution to run your school transportation operation? The best routing software may be one company. The best parent app could be another company. Those days are over. TransFinder said the old way of doing business doesn't work for today's busy and burdened school transportation departments. They need one partner, one solution. TransFinder has embraced this approach for years now, building award-winning solutions like Route Finder Plus, the driver app Wayfinder, parent app Stop Finder, and inventory management solution Service Finder. They also have field trip management solutions, Trip Finder, and Viewfinder, which provide critical routing information to other stakeholders in the district. Add to this TransFinder's award-winning hardware and industry's best support and service. You have the ingredients that make up one partner, one solution. It's not just a slogan. It's TransFinder's way of doing business. Learn more by emailing getplus@transfinder.com or calling 800-373-3609. That's 800-373-3609. Remember, one partner, one solution. Guys, this was a great conversation. Really have enjoyed it a lot. ACT Expo did not disappoint there in Las Vegas. We thank them for inviting us as a media sponsor. It was a great opportunity for us to get the latest trends, talk to the exhibitors. Gosh, at our own shows, I feel like we're so busy. So this is a great opportunity when we're not being pulled in 20 different directions, right, Ryan?
Absolutely. And you get to take a breath and really absorb some more with the expos. It's just sprint, and it's over before you realized it. But Tony, I'm just looking forward to these last hours before we head to Expo. In Indy, we came back from Vegas. We were able to do some laundry. We're packed. I'm almost done packing because we're leaving like tomorrow. So let's go do this thing.
Yeah, no, and I'm really looking forward to seeing our keynote, Wayne Lee, right? He's got this great message where he's going to really look at kind of what are the barriers that you put up as an individual to kind of affect your success, that affect you, and how when you remove those mental barriers, how you can become more successful, how you can thrive. What does that do to a team? What does that do to amplify your performance? So really excited to hear his keynote. And he does use a little hypnotism. So I know he's been enrolling some of our TDs specifically because he's leading the Transportation Director Summit as well as keynoting to volunteer. And our friend Kenny Jean Schrader, who Taylor had the opportunity to interview last week, she was like, I volunteered, Tony. I hope I don't make a fool of myself in front of the audience. I was like, don't worry, right?
It'll be fun.
This is going to be a lot of fun. A great exercise to see what's possible. And, whenever you see or you hear, you don't want it to be hokey. You want it to be fun. You want it to be engaging and memorable. And I think everybody in attendance at SCN Expo East there in Indianapolis is going to be really jazzed when they walk away from this keynote with Wayne Lee. Well, guys, it's another episode. We're glad you made it. This is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen to Pods Nation. Also, special thanks to our sponsors, TransFinder and IC Bus. Nation, we are going to see you next week, but I just want to make a quick announcement. podcast producer Claudia is moving. But that's the best part about it is when you move away in this environment, it's not like you're really gone. You're just out of our zip code, right? So we wish you well, Claudia, and we're excited to have you stay podcasting and doing everything with the team. And we appreciate you. And thanks for always making us sound great when we flub and you make those edits.
Hey, just to know, so no, Claudia's not, she's leaving as in going to another city, but she's not leaving the STN family. So any of the folks out there that are worried, rest assured.
So we appreciate you, Claudia, and Nation, we love you. We'll see you next week.